Hello and welcome to another episode of Storied Arcs. I am your host, Mike.
And I'm your host, Alex.
And we are on Volume 5 of Paper Girls. Hard to believe we're so close to the end, and every trade gets better in this series.
I think, most definitely.
With the exception of 3 was a slight, maybe plateauing or stepping back in terms of like the momentum and the excitement, but man, I just got giddy because this is what I remembered about the series. This stuff now happening, all of the cross connections, and it's not. So I will say that trade 5 here is my favorite trade so far. It's getting to the point where it's silly to rank them because trade 5 is only great because trade 3 exists, and trade 3 is my least favorite of the run. But trade 5 is so good that it redeems that one where it's like, oh, I spent all that time there for this.
Yeah, I think so much of we talked about a little last episode about how, we're on the back half. Volume 4 was the start of the back half of the series. 15 to 30, we're starting right there. So we're on the back half of the roller coaster. And when you're in it, you don't kind of see where Volume 3 fits in, but that's all table setting for, you build up those first two, with our set the table. And then all of a sudden you're taken out of all of that, thrown back into prehistoric time. And in the moment you are a little lost. Just kind of, where are we going with this? What is this setting up? And you're hopeful that it does set up something. And then you get into Volume 4 and Volume 5, that back half, the downhill part of the roller coaster, we're speeding towards the end, and you're seeing how everything connects back. And without Volume 3, you don't have these big revelations that are coming through in 4, and especially here in Volume 5, and that connect all the way back to Volume 1. So it is hard to say that, in the moment as you're reading it, Volume 3 feels like there's some filler there. Like, what have we really advanced in the story? And then as you get past it, you see, oh, this is setting the table for quite literally everything that's coming after that. So it's at Volume 5, like you said, Volume 5 doesn't land if you haven't read Volume 3. If you aren't given that information there, and if that isn't presented in the way it is, you don't get the big major hits that come in this volume here. Yeah.
So, without any further ado, let's dive straight into it, because I'm sure...
Excuse me.
We have other things to... Bless you. I'm sure we have other things to say, but I will say I think the plot recap, we're not going to do panel by panel breakdown. I think at this point we've discussed a lot of our love of the art and the coloring and things like that, which have remained consistent.
I think, although I do say, I think this arc has the best color. Because I think
I agree. And it has the widest range.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah.
If you look back at the first 4 arcs there, a lot of those arcs, for the most part, they're all kind of tone shaded. There's a predominant vibe and feel, the kind of main color palette you see in those 4 arcs there. And I think this one really combines, it kind of pulls from all of them. And you do have the widest range of color, and it feels like a bit of a culmination as you're pulling from all these earlier arcs. And obviously in this arc, we jump to different timelines. We jump back to our prehistoric timeline.
Beginning of issue 24, you get the BC times.
We jump back to 1988.
Those are very ordinary colors. When you get that. So,
but it is the widest range.
It's consistent.
I think it's the best color.
Even the colorists knew where they were going.
Yes.
Because these colors are exactly what the panels on that flash forward.
Yes.
That KJ has.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
KJ. Yeah. The flash forward that she has, she sees all of the key events coming in the series, and they're all colored appropriately for what will be happening. So it's like, not only does BKV know where he's going, everyone's in on it.
Yeah.
Everyone on the creative team has a clear map. And like, there are pros and cons for each kind of storytelling, whether you paint yourself into a corner by writing and then find a clever way out of it, or whether you do the ship in a bottle type thing, Tolkien-esque, where you lay the whole thing out before you start writing. I respect both styles, but this is the Tolkien-esque style.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes me wonder if early on,
I wonder if Saga's the same way.
Yeah, well,
that's my real question.
I think it is. I think that's how it generally works with creators. But I think with this one, I really do wonder if there was some sort of early kind of like, Bible document for them saying that, we're going to these different timelines and we want to set a color palette. We want to set a vibe for each one of them so that when we get there, however conscious or subconscious it feels to the reader, not only is it obvious that we're in a different timeline, based on the surroundings, but the color, and that specific palette is going to feel that way. So he said, whether you register it as a reader or not, consciously, it's going to be there. And so that they knew that, hey, this, where are we now? We're in the year 2171, that we're in this future timeline here. It's going to look and feel like this, even though we're going to see it in KJ's vision before we actually get there in the story. But we're going to plan ahead because we know that these certain areas are going to look these certain ways. That they're already kind of preset. They discuss this stuff, before, in the formulation of the whole story, that they had a plan for, what each of these eras were going to look and feel like. And it makes sense to me that they would have done that and had that level of planning. So yeah, they can lay these things, out early on, and your mind will call back to the things you've already seen, before you even get there. You're already primed to see and primed to feel what they want you to do, what you want you to see and feel for this era, even though we just got here. But it already feels like somewhere we've seen before because they've planted those seeds already.
Yeah, I mean, so shout out again to the artistic team here.
Cliff Chang, Matt Wilson. Phenomenal on the pencils.
And I couldn't remember. Cliff did the pencils, right?
Yeah, Cliff does the main pencils, and Matt Wilson is the colors.
Cliff also does coloring other places, but he was just pencils here.
Yeah, just pencils here. Yeah, they did different projects. He's done other things, but yeah, this one here, Matt Wilson, one of the best top colorists. Again, colorists tend to not get a lot of the due, but if you're reading a big time book, there's a decent chance it's colored by Matt Wilson. If you, because he's one of the best, one of the tops, and one of the busiest colorists in the industry. He's phenomenal, and so the choice of color palette across the book it is so phenomenal, and it's so specific, to the point where you see these kind of neon pastel colors, and I automatically think Paper Girls if I see it anywhere else, And so we talked briefly the episodes ago about the teaser for the television show. They use the same color palette, and
it's the easiest teaser ever made, and they completely crushed it.
Yeah. And they pull the same design of the logo from Jared Fletcher. They pull the same colors, the same palette, the same hues, to cast over the actors' faces, and said if you've read the book, you see that, and you instantly you're there. It takes you right there that you understand that they understand. They get it because they're using the same color palette. They're using the same thing because they know just seeing the colors is transportive to get you into the story. So definite shout out to Cliff and Matt on that.
Yeah. So I just made a note to myself to make sure we do that. Yeah. I feel like it's just all too easy and very common to just fall at the feet of Brian K. Vaughan when you're reading one of these books. And
to fall at the feet of the writer. To always fall, to always talk about comic books as but
I think especially Brian K. Vaughan.
Yeah.
He's like such a he's just one of those guys where his name appears and I'm like, I'll buy it. I'll buy it and then ask what it is. So anyway, and that's not to take anything away from Brian. And if you read Brian's letters in the back of books, he's always pointing back to the artist, back to the creative team.
Well, and I think
thanking his fans. Very gracious guy.
It's also very notable that partway through the run on Saga, the order of credits changed. Fiona Staples is credited first before. Ooh. So that happened somewhere in the middle of the early run. It was no announcement or anything like that, but it was just, if you're reading through the title page, all of a sudden, 99.9% of books are writers first, pencilist second, then colorist, inker, letter or whatever. But yeah, on Saga, Fiona Staples has top credit, which is incredibly rare. And I think that speaks to what BKV feels as her contribution to the book, and I think it's a way of him to try and shed some more light on artists and understand it as a visual medium. Because again, it's so easy to refer to comics as by writers only, because writers are always credited first. So they're the first person you think of because of the first name listed. But I think a book specifically like Paper Girls is enhanced so much by what you see. Because I think you could get so much out of the story. You can get so much of the feel of the vibe if you just removed all the letters, all the words. Sorry BKV, right. Sorry Jared Fletcher. We're taking the script and we're taking the word balloons out. If you just went panel to panel by the art, I think you would understand the emotion.
Well, I mean,
and you would understand the story. Yeah,
that's proven because a good portion of it's written in a gobbledygook language.
Absolutely, yeah.
That you can't discern until nerds on the internet have decrypted it years later.
Yeah.
So it just proves the weight of the art. So anyway,
absolutely.
Speaking of the art, we open again a trade with a dream sequence.
Yes,
and this time we always kind of learn ostensibly who the protagonist, like who's taking their turn.
Yeah.
As the protagonist for the story arc.
Yeah.
And this time it is Mackenzie.
Yeah.
Now another dream sequence where it is. So first of all, is every dream here a nightmare?
Yeah, they've all started fairly benign. Aaron's was the most surreal, but that also, because
the others
both KJ and Matt
what seem to be memories.
Yes, yeah, you would assume so. Yeah, KJ on the field hockey pitch, I guess. I'm not sure what they call it in that sport. And Mac, which you have to assume is a memory of her at a library.
Right, which you don't think of her as bookish.
Yeah.
The librarian refers to her as Miss Coyle, and I'm like, wait, Coyle, whose last name is that?
Yeah.
Because I'm like, this is not my picture of Mackenzie.
Yes, yeah.
It's someone sheepishly trying to check out a book above her reading level.
Yeah.
It's like, what happened to Mackenzie?
A real book, by the way. A real book, Sweet Valley High. That is
Sweet Valley High Secrets.
Book 2. That is a real book. So that if you could, I've never read those books, but I read the synopsis of that book. And it's something to do with wanting to be like prom queen or something like that. And one of the twins is going up against her other twin's best friend, and it's back. I got about halfway through, my brain melted. So perhaps if you
okay,
yeah.
So the book that she was accused of wanting, though, was Flowers in the Attic.
Yes, I know Flowers in the Attic.
Do you? Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
I had to look it up.
Wait,
you knew it apart from looking it up?
Yes. Oh God, yes. Yeah. Flowers in the Attic is one of those books that, yeah. If you don't know Flowers in the Attic,
I don't. I have the Wikipedia up in front of me right now.
I was gonna say, have fun reading that synopsis. Yeah.
I'll check. It's gothic horror is the genre / family saga. Part of the Doppelganger series.
Family Saga. Like, that's funny. Wow. I'm sorry. So anyone out there who is listening who
hey, Brian K. Vaughan loves family sagas, as we know.
This
quite literally.
This is a different level of Family Saga. Flowers in the Attic. There was also it might have been I want to say it's a movie. It might have been a TV movie as well that came out about this. That was fairly controversial because the book is fairly controversial. But yeah, if you so anyway,
but that's where Brian K. Vaughan sees himself, right?
A little bit, yeah.
The edgy, kind of controversial authors. I mean,
but also
books have been banned by public libraries.
But also that would have been from a time frame wise, that would Mac in that dream, she claims she's 11? She's 12 essentially. So presumably, they're 12 in the current timeline. This is clearly sometime before that, so she might be like 9 or 10 in this flashback memory. So, her reading or the librarian presuming it's flowers in the attic, that would have been, that's another very timely 80s reference there.
Okay, yeah. So maybe I'm just a hair too young for that reference.
Maybe so.
Which frankly feels good.
Yeah.
So
it's not a book.
Anyway,
it's not a book you have to read. It's definitely. I'm very very pro reading. Flowers in the Attic is not one I think you have to go read. That's one you can go read the wiki on, and you'll get and
just don't do it before you go to bed.
Reading the wiki. I'm sure reading a full synopsis you will understand very quickly why it was a controversial book, and why the librarian in this case would have assumed that someone may have been slightly sheepish about checking it out. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But yeah, but
anyway, this librarian eventually reminds her that she's going to die, turns into a monster. Kind of classic turn of events for these dream sequences. And the librarian specifically reminds her of leukemia, which, again, we talked about the meaning of dreams, and it's like, is it the person's ruminations on their own thoughts, or is there some external voice speaking to them, or is it just totally random scrambling of everything that's been in their head, or is it premonitions? I don't know. I don't know if there's any way to know, but we definitely, if nothing else, it just kind of reminds you what issues at the forefront of the character's mind.
Yeah.
And it may not really serve anything more than that.
Yeah.
But I guarantee they're going to pick up all of these to open the episodes of the TV show with.
I would think so. I would think so.
These light sequences that turn to horror.
Yeah.
And then snap you, and then you get the title card.
It really does. It feels like perfect cold open kind of material, though. But it is interesting, though. You talk about, we go back and Volume 1 opens with Erin's dream sequence, and she's obviously our first main focus character. And she really is the main focus for the first 2 volumes, because obviously we meet 2016 Erin in Volume 2. Volume 3, we catch up with KJ, and we start with her dream sequence, and she is ostensibly kind of the main focus of Volume 3. Volume 4 is really Tiffany's story, because we start with her, and obviously we meet 2000 Tiffany, who is still palling around with them here in this volume. But interestingly, we don't get a dream sequence with her, but she is still ostensibly the quote unquote main focus character of Volume 4. But here in Volume 5, we jump back to the dream sequence, and although I think this story arc is more democratic with its story in terms of there really isn't a main focus on Mac. You could argue there isn't.
Right.
I'm sorry. I think on the surface there isn't a main focus on Mac, but you could argue that we learn the most about her character.
There's not a new focus on Mac.
No, but
it's she gets a lot more spotlight.
Yeah,
but there's not really new information being presented here.
Well, but I think there is. I think more is revealed about Mac's character in this arc. Even though, they spent a lot of it split up, Mac and KJ are together and Erin and Tiffany's together. So we're jumping back between kind of two different settings. But I think we learn more about Mac in this arc than we do any other 3.
That's true. Cause you do get the kiss.
Yeah.
And then you do see that change in growth.
Yeah, there is.
Let me just say, in the dream sequence, okay, so 2 things. One, I know we already shared offline our bookmarks for the episode, but frankly, only dorks want to escape life might actually be mine. I had written that down and I totally forgot about it, but it's so good.
Yeah.
And it's so Mac.
Yeah. Well, and such
this is Mackenzie.
That's such a great panel too, because in that moment when it flips to horror, Mac's own self-image in her dream jumps her to present day.
Right.
Because before she's clearly younger, her hair is longer, it's different, and she's drawn much younger. Then all of a sudden, when it jumps to the nightmare portion, boom, she's back in her current state, and she's got a snarl in her face, and she's holding KJ's field hockey stick, and that's a really really glorious panel.
Yeah. Now the hockey stick has I guess we do
Yes.
written on it.
Yes.
Is that a previously stated line? Am I missing something?
It is.
I felt really dense there.
It is. So that is part of the vision that KJ has. She has two scenes in her head, and the first one is of Max saying, "Then I guess we do," and then the second one is them kissing. And so if you fast forward to, what is it, issue 25?
Yeah,
when they kiss?
Right. I definitely caught it.
Yeah.
I thought it was the seed,
Yeah.
and it was harvested later in this arc.
Yeah.
But I didn't know if it was already a callback and it was being harvested.
Yes, yeah, it is both. So that line, which is interesting because Mac doesn't know that, because KJ hasn't told her yet that she has this other vision of them in the future, and that Mac's specifically going to say that line. So
There's been a slow reveal, though. The slow reveal was, I think I'm a lesbian.
Yes, yeah, but
we were on this rooftop.
Well, but that rooftop conversation comes after this dream sequence. It comes.
Right.
So that line being on the carved in the field hockey stick, for Mac to see that, said that isn't from any kind of external force. So that's kind of this blending of the space time. When are things happening? And we see a little more of that too with Mac, after they've split up a little later, and she hears that cry on the walkie-talkie when it's like she's saying, what is it like, like, oh God, she's dead, they killed her, or whatever it is. And she doesn't recognize the voice, and KJ's like, that's you. And we don't know where that comes from or where it happens. Again, fast forward to issue 25, the end of the arc, and then we see Mac deliver those lines into the walkie-talkie after 2000's Tiffany has jumped at the cop on the hover bike and sacrificed herself and blown up. So there is this weird blending of kind of time and space, of things that are going to happen in the near future that are kind of bleeding back. And it's one of those things that actually they never really kind of go into it in this arc, but it's just kind of another example of how, time and space are a little malleable, and they're kind of folding in on each other. And maybe just specifically on these four girls, or maybe just specifically in Mac.
Yeah. So she snaps out of this dream. She's in the future where we left them at the end of the last arc. They start walking toward a library, and there's this, I think, I can't remember if we were recording when I said this, but I was like, I think a good third to half of the episode is just going to be on the first issue.
Probably so.
Because we get this seemingly casual throwaway line from Aaron about how, they don't need to worry. I think we're invisible to people from the future.
Yeah.
And I was like, that it could just be that I'm primed to receive these type of insights from Brian K. Vaughan. But I was like, is that meant to be a double meaning? Like, people from the past are invisible to people in the future because, as we're soon to hear from Double O Tiff, life is ephemeral.
That's interesting. I hadn't thought about that.
Are they saying, we've already faded from their existence, that they don't see us in the future?
That's deep.
Either way, it is really deep. But see, that's the kind of thing that would be in the narration of Saga, and we have no narration here.
Yeah.
So he has to hammer these little insights in where he can, and that could be totally fabricated by me, but I think it works.
Well, it doesn't not work. I'll put it that way. So that means it's.
I'll take it.
There's nothing contradictory in the story that would say that that's absolutely wrong. But yeah, no, I didn't read it that way at all. But that's very fascinating to think about. I took that as face value because the girls are invisible. They can't be tracked as of right now because of what happened. Again, calling all the way back to the first arc.
Except to drug dealers. Drug dealers can see them.
Well, no, they can be seen visually, but they can't be tracked as time travelers by Japo and the cathedral, as it's called. Because again, it goes back to when they were scanned when they first encountered that ship in the basement of that house. So when they're moving through time, they can't be tracked or detected. So that was I took that as face value, but that's very interesting to think that to think about it in a deeper kind of light. The idea that that things from the past have simply been forgotten because they're out of sight, out of mind. We're on to the next thing.
Which, by the way, can we just say how much we love that they've coined the name Double O Tiff?
Yes.
So we don't have to call someone younger than us Old Tiff.
Yes. Although
Brian.
I'm totally fine. We can call Wari old. No offense to Wari, but we can call her old. I think she qualifies as old.
Yeah, no throwing shade there. That's grandfather, it's right there in the name.
Exactly. Yeah, Joppo is old.
By the
too.
way, repping the Wu-Tang shirt.
Yeah,
it's like, when the heck is this dude from?
Well, and that's just it. The idea that again we learn about all of their history here, but the idea that he is still repping and wearing clothes, because he also wore the Apple Records shirt, which is that's a Beatles thing. He's wearing stuff from the 20th century,
right.
That maybe that's just the era he connects with. I don't know, but yeah, no, it's Double O Tiff is good because there is. They do make a joke about Tiffany 2000, and it does really remind me of, again, if you were alive in the early mid 90s, it felt like everything to sound futuristic was something 2000. Everything was that's how you made something sound futuristic and cool or neat, and that seemed like a really funny idea, a real great idea until like 1998. And you're like, oh wait, we're actually going to get to the year 2000. So now, now it seems less clever. But everything was Blink 2000. That was the marketing gimmick. So
I do recall Conan O'Brien having a satirical recurring bit called In the Year 2000.
Yes.
That were lofty projections about the future that he only started doing in like 2001.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't make sense now if you go look them up on YouTube because they may have come out in the 90s, but they were all intentionally ironic, just like the great Flight of the Conchords song about the year 2000 when the robots take over, recorded in 2007.
Yeah.
But anyway, we get is it Timbuk 3?
Yes,
that's a reference.
Yes, Timbuk 3.
That Double O Tiff has no memory of.
Yeah, well, I like that inversion there. That our four protagonists, our four girls from the 80s, they make a pop culture reference, and it's Double O Tiff who's the one that's lost. As opposed to our four girls being the ones who are like, I don't understand what's going on. What do those words mean? And yet they can drop a future so bright I gotta wear shades reference, and Double O Tiff is like, I have no idea what that is.
To me, it's so fascinating that it's this like to young Tiff. Yeah. It's like this is a big deal. That's the second cassette we ever bought.
Yeah, she calls them one of the biggest bands in the world. Yeah.
But I was trying to think. So I never owned that many cassettes. I know that I did own cassettes, but CDs came out. Yeah. When I was in elementary. Well, they were big. They were probably out my whole life, but they were big by the time I was in elementary school.
Oh, definitely.
I started buying my own music. Yeah. And I was like, man, could I remember like the first 5 albums I bought? And then you land on the Double O Tiff line, Life is Ephemeral.
Yeah.
I can tell you, I don't know the first CD I bought, but I know the second was Dookie by Green Day, as it came out.
This came up. This is one of those things that's come up multiple times randomly in the past couple of years. I believe the first CD I bought, I definitely own tapes. I cannot tell you what cassette tapes I would have owned or bought. I am fairly certain the first CD I ever bought with my own money was Off the Deep End, Weird Al Yankovic.
Oh yeah, and I would guess in my first 10 albums there were at least 2 there.
Oh,
and by the way, I'm very excited for that Daniel Radcliffe portrait.
That looks phenomenal. It looks phenomenal. But yeah, I think that was the first CD I bought with my own money, there's an incredibly high likelihood that it was not just Weird Al, but that it was specifically off the deep end. With Smells Like Nirvana and all that. But yeah, that was it is something to think about though, because again, Double O Tiff is only 12 years older. Now that's a big gap between 24 and 12. But you think about something that was
a lot of stuff happens.
Yeah. You think about what you were
as much life.
Yeah, what you were super into at 12 could have absolutely zero impact on you at 24.
Right. However, I will say the gap between 12 and 24 is the same number of days between the gap and between
24 and 36.
24 and 36.
And it's much
that. But I have that. If one, it flew by much faster. There was much more continuity in my life in those 12 years.
Oh yeah. Well, they because as you get older, the age gaps shrink. Right. Like I said, my older brother Tony is 3 years older than me. So when I'm in middle school and he's in high school, or I'm in elementary school and he's in middle school, that gap is like 600 years. Right. But then I'm a freshman in high school. He's a senior in high school. And it's a lot closer. And then he's in grad school at the same university I'm at undergrad in. And now all of a sudden we're like literally peers, and now we're in our 40s and we might as well be the same age, so that 3-year gap just gets smaller and smaller the older you get. So yeah, 12 to 24 is not the same as 24 to 36. But yeah, it's a funny moment there for Double O Tiff to realize that,
by the way, what's your read on Double O Tiff? How would you describe her character in contrast to our Tiff?
Well, I think it is. Well,
I guess it's impossible to parse out how this story arc ends.
Yeah.
But it's kind of a mopey comment.
Yeah.
But she doesn't really strike me as a downer or a mopey person. She still seems like the spark is alive.
Well, So I think this is less in relation to younger Tiff, 1988 Tiff, but I think Double O Tiff is simply like, she's just like a perfect avatar for that Gen X kind of burned out, early 20s. What have I done with my life? She's unemployed. She kind of rushed into a marriage. She is looking back on her life with all this regret, and she's only 24. So so it's kind of like everything.
Yeah, and that's that generation in a nutshell.
Yes, everything kind of magnified right there. But what I think is what we see through this arc. I think we start seeing her change some, because I think she's very different when we first meet her in her own time, dealing with her own stuff in the year 2000. When she talks about how I got to where I am. And she wants to go back to 1988 because she feels like she can change stuff. She can do something different, meaning she does not want to be in her own timeline because she doesn't like where her life is. But I think what we're seeing, as we work our way through, this arc, I think we're seeing her kind of mature a little in real time. Not just being, protective of these girls, but kind of understanding, the importance of who these girls are and how they could be in her life. And she gets to the point at the very end, right before she sacrifices herself and jumps at the cop, what she says to her younger self is, take care of your friends, and whatever you do, don't settle. And that's incredibly similar to the advice that 2016 Erin gave to her younger self. A much older, a little wiser version of being like, kind of forget about the stuff that may or may not happen to you. Like, be with these girls, take care of them,
and be present.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a much more mature 24-year-old Tiffany than we saw in the previous arc, who was still, quote unquote an adult, but really not, still very much a child.
Right.
With a childish view on the world. So I think we see her progress to the point where she would make that sacrifice. She would jump and do that. There's even that moment when the two Tiffanys and Aaron, when they get up to Wari's or penthouse or whatever, and that kind of security robot attacks the two Tiffanys, and Aaron goes to kind of cut them loose, and she first moves towards Double O Tiff, and Tiffany's like, wait, no, like don't say, like save her, because if she dies, I die. So there's this idea here that she is kind of, I think she is maturing and seeing that, that, got to be protective of the younger.
I do question sort of the science of that.
Oh, 100%.
But I definitely get the logic. Especially in a moment.
You see where she's coming from in the moment. Absolutely. I'm not saying she's absolutely right about how she views it. But I'm saying is that in that moment, how she views herself relative to a younger self, she is now.
Well, she's saying save my potential rather than save my actual self.
Yeah, but
right. It's like,
but she's also
that's
saying
the potential me.
Yeah, she's also saying she is not putting herself first, which is a very kind of a Gen X thing. She is not focused on herself. She is being selfless in that point, in a way, because obviously it's still saving a younger version of herself. But in this moment, though, she very much sees younger Tiffany as both a separate person and also a younger her. I think she sees it in kind of both ways. But
and I will say all four of these girls are painted as selfless.
Yeah, definitely.
That's just what they all have.
The younger girls, absolutely, multiple times.
In fact, the only thing you could even argue is slightly selfish is Mac's drive in this arc to get her cure. But KJ is like just as fixated on that mission as Mac is. For reasons unknown to Mac.
Yeah.
But so it's not, and it's certainly not selfish to say I'm going to die in a couple years of cancer. Let me deal with that when I have a chance.
Yeah. Well, and it's not like anyone's saying, well, it's less about don't go and try to find a cure if there's one there for you, and more just about like, we really shouldn't be in this timeline, so the less time we spend here, the better. So it's less about don't help Mac and more about this fear of, kind of the longer we're in the future, the longer we're away from our own timeline, maybe the worse things that can happen. So it isn't like none of these girls want Mac to die. It's just, they're more fearful that the more they interact with this world, the worse things can possibly get. But yeah, I mean, every possibility, every turn, when any one of them is in danger, any one of them will immediately jump in and try to protect them. Doesn't matter who it is. Doesn't matter which one of them is being attacked or strangled or has a gun to their head. Doesn't matter. When one of them is in danger, one of the other four will immediately jump in and risk themselves to protect the other. And we'd say that's a through line throughout the entire. We've seen it in every arc. Any chance that one of them is in danger, they jump in and help without even thinking. And I think that's something that maybe Double O Tiff had lost growing up because she didn't have these girls in her life, and it's being around them and this experience in the future, seeing how they are together, that maybe kind of shake something in her to the point where she's going to sacrifice herself. She's going to sacrifice herself so her younger self can maybe have something a little better, not by changing anything major in their life, not by making different decisions on what to study in school or anything like that, but simply by being friends with these girls. And again, that goes right back to what 2016 Aaron said to her younger self, that if you could change one thing, is stay friends with these girls, because that could be a positive influence. And that's the thing maybe that changes who you are in the future, and not the changing your major and not getting a different job. That's not the thing that's going to change. It's the personal relationship with these people that you clearly have a connection and affection for, that I think Double O Tiff looks back on and thinks like, maybe that was the thing I was missing. Because I think that's what 2016 Aaron sees. And I think that's what 2000 Tiffany comes to see as well, that the thing that was missing wasn't all these choices I made about schooling and all that stuff, my job. It was, I missed out on being with these girls and having them as my friends in life. And that was a guiding force that if I had that, maybe that's what the change is. That's what I'd have to focus on.
Yeah. All right. We need to pivot before I spoil the next volume.
Yeah.
Because, everything you're saying just makes me want to jump to the last issue.
I know.
I'm just gonna leave it alone. Just one more week, and we're there. Okay, so the last thing I have to say about issue 21, and then I promise we're gonna pick up the pace here.
We'll try.
They go to the library. It's about as popular then as it is now.
Yep.
It's like,
unfortunately,
some people hanging out there using it for other things. You
Yeah.
know, it is what it is. But it's there. They show up to this digital library interface, which looks like a tree.
Yes.
And then they grab an answer that looks like a big apple dangling from it,
Yep.
and we're right back to the tree of knowledge, eating the fruit of that. From page 1 of the first issue, this image has just been beating you over the head. And what do they learn from this computer, among other things, is that there is a cure for leukemia.
Yes.
And that they're in the year, is it 2171?
2171, yes.
2171. And bum, 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 that's the end of 21.
Yeah.
Then we pick up the clip quite a bit. We finally meet Old Wari, who is the cover for that issue. And
Yes.
we now get the little inscriptions again before the issues, which these are all quotes from
As time goes by.
lyrics, right?
Yeah, they were unused lyrics, or there were lyrics and verses that were unused in Casablanca, which is probably the most famous use of As Time Goes By. It's the song that Sam sings in Rick's. But yeah, they're all lyrics about, looking ahead, what's stored in the future, and they're all very relevant. As unused lines up until the final issue in the arc, issue 25, which is the opening stanza of As Time Goes By, which is something that if you've seen Casablanca, or if you know the song, those lyrics will jump out at you. But again, they're also all very relevant. But it is very interesting that the epigraphs are all from the same piece of art, the same piece of creation, which I think is very, very, very cool. That he's able to pull that in.
Makes me wonder if Brian got a hold of those unused lyrics, was reading them, and somehow came up with the idea for the story.
Yeah, or I wouldn't put it past him that it's the kind of thing that he's always known. Maybe it's a song that he loves and something he's already known and kind of knew as he was working on this kind of story of time travel and things of that nature that it would be perfectly relevant for what the story he had in mind.
Yeah. So,
excuse me again.
Bless you again. So now we open in 2171 with Wari talking to her little robot friend, which I would be willing to bet up to 50 cents that when the Amazon Prime show comes out, that will be an Alexa bot.
Yeah, there's a really good chance. Yeah.
I mean, why not? Why not? Why not have a little bit of fun if Brian will let you? Because
the 84,
especially if you're gonna leave in the shot they take at Amazon. That 2016 Aaron takes.
Yeah.
It's like, you take your shot there, and then you give us a little Alexa bot with Old Wari. That's fine.
85th generation or whatever version of oh
my gosh,
the Alexa.
I'm sure it would be like, I think we're already approaching the 85th version.
We might be.
With all of the dots and home and all that other stuff.
That's true.
Every 4
by
minutes.
By 2171, we may be well on. In fact, if it's still Alexa in 2171, Amazon will probably think that's a failure. They're probably on to like the 4th or 5th or 100th different.
And by the way, I apologize to anyone listening on speakers with an Alexa in the room.
Oh yeah.
Which is
mine is currently not within earshot, so thankfully.
Okay, I was gonna say, one of my favorite podcasts of all time was the West Wing Weekly podcast, and Josh Molina, the co-host, would frequently say things at the beginning of the show. He would just mutter instructions to your Alexa in case you were listening on a speaker. Which is just like, if you don't know who Josh Molina is, now you do.
Perfect.
That right there,
perfectly on brand. Perfectly on brand.
Everything sums up that man in a nutshell.
Yeah.
So anyway, we see Wari Her memory's kind of slipping. She's struggling with disease. She's refusing medication. Clearly, she's winding down. She's ready. She's coped with the idea of death and is reconciled to it.
Early onset dementia or early onset Alzheimer's, something like that. Yeah.
Something that presumably is treatable, but she's just had enough.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And grandfather seems to understand that. He's like, I wish you'd take your medicines, but, not going to make a big stink about it. Maybe they've gone rounds and rounds about it for 100 years.
Probably.
Who knows? But Japo calls her sister. She calls him brother. And it's like, I see what you're doing, but we're not fooled. Yeah. Like, we know this is a mother-son relationship because we literally saw it happen.
Well, we know that, but but Wari definitely insinuates that Japo doesn't know that.
That's true.
Yeah,
that's true.
Yeah. So
the sister brother is religious talk. They are part of the cathedral, part of this organization called Watch.
Yes,
which governs time travel. And then we cut back to our girls.
Well, also
they are talking to the tree.
Real quick though, just one of those callbacks there. While he's talking with Wari, Japo gets a call on the phone, the Apple phone, which Wari mentions that only person that calls on that thing is him, so it must be important. And the person on the other end is Alistair. Alistair, if you remember going all the way back to the first arc, he's the first person from the future that we see show up in 1988. He zaps the
he talks to the girls in the middle of the street.
Yeah,
right?
He zaps the two high school kids who are at the football field. He is the one that killed Jude, and we actually see that. We don't see that happen in the first arc. We see that happen later in this volume when he goes back to 1988. He confronts Jude, and we see Jude die. And he confronts our paper girls in the street, and then he is killed by Heck. That's a retaliation on Heck's part for killing his boyfriend Jude. So this is a character. So we see them, the characters, the versions of the old timers and grandfather, the versions of them that we see in 1988 from their timeline, from their perspective, are the versions we see here in 2171, because they leave from this time to go back to the beginning of the story.
Right.
You can tell by the dress, and again, that Alistair's still alive, all that happens. So that's another way of kind of connecting another circle of when in their timeline, when in their experience are they meeting them, and they're meeting them now. And of course gets confusing when Aaron sees the picture of Japo later and is like, he's the guy that I saw, in 1988 before we vanished, and that's right. Exactly what, and that is literally the guy they saw, because for Japo, that's like 20 minutes after, Aaron has this conversation in the future about, hey, this is the guy I saw. And then they're going to jump back to 1988 and confront them in front of that house before they vanish in a flash of light and end up in 2016. So it's another tracking. And again, who they're tracking is not our paper girls. They are tracking our three time travelers. They're tracking Heck, Naldo, and Jude. Those are the time travelers they're tracking back to 1988, which starts the whole process and starts the whole story. So just another way that this book ties back to everything we've read before. Yeah.
It's like, I'm trying to think of the right metaphor for it. I was gonna say it's almost like, Rusty and Christmas Vacation sorting through the Christmas lights, where it's like it's technically a strand, but it's just one tangled ball.
It's all everything is connected. Nothing you saw earlier in any of the earlier volumes is something that stands alone. Everything comes back. We see ties to nearly every character. By the end of this arc, we understand what has happened and the origins of pretty much everything we've seen before. It's pretty impressive that way in terms of tying up loose ends as we head into what is the final arc of the story in Volume 6. So so much of this arc is kind of sprinkling in some Easter eggs to remind you of things you saw in Volume 1, Volume 2, Volume 3. And it starts right here with Alistair. But right after this, we jump back to the we jump back to the library and our tree of knowledge.
Yeah. Yeah, and so they jump back there. They get assaulted by what is actually the librarian.
Yes.
Which looks like a it looks like a prototype for the Days of Future Past Sentinels.
It does, yeah. It's got a
but
very.
It looks a little more organic.
It's got a very Clayface thing to it.
Which they don't call it Clayface. They call it.
They do call it claymation, I think.
Claymation, right?
Because it does it explodes.
Clayface is DC, right?
Yes, it is. Yeah, it explodes in a way that looks like it is some sort of kind of partial liquid there. So yeah, clay seems not inappropriate for a description.
Yeah, could be a T-1000. I don't know.
It could be. You never know. Could be.
Okay, so and they destroy their only weapon.
Yes,
doing that. But it's Tiff who steps up, young Tiff who steps up, save the crew. Frankly, then you go back to the cathedral. They talk about their plans.
And again,
go back to 88. They're trying to clean up 88.
Yeah.
While realizing the whole thing's going to collapse in on itself if they don't get the girls back there.
They are planning,
and not time. Time is going to be fine.
Yes, but the world's going to end.
Right. Yeah. Hold on. I just remembered. There's a fairly obscure band called Lost in the Trees.
Don't know.
Yeah. Well, they have an album called Time Taunts Me, and I was just thinking, man, this would be like the absolute best song to sprinkle in here somewhere. Except it's not an '80s song; it's like a 2010s indie song. But just lyrically, it fits.
Well, if it's 2010, that's an oldie for 2171, right?
That's it's classical.
It's classical music, absolutely. Yeah.
It's like in Star Trek Beyond when they put on the Beastie
when they play Sabotage. Yes.
Spock says, "Is this
classical music?"
Or someone says, "Is this classical music?" And Spock says, "I believe it is."
Yeah.
Great reference for an okay movie.
Yeah, it was okay.
I didn't hate it.
It was okay.
So anyway, we're in Cleveland. The girls decide to split up. They take their walkie-talkies, make fun of Aaron for being a pack rat. Mm-hmm. Yet this always happens. You make fun of the pack rat, and then you're like, "Hey, can I borrow that?"
Yep. They come through.
There's a very specific episode of How I Met Your Mother that comes to mind when there's like a hurricane coming and it's going to hit New York City. And everyone's making fun of Ted and his yellow jacket and his emergency backpacks because he was a Boy Scout. And then as soon as the power goes out, everyone's latching onto him, trying to. It's like everyone's mocking him until they're like, "Hey, can I have your stuff?"
Until they need it. Yep.
Erin does not seem defensive about that, which I'm proud of her for.
Yeah.
So then your partnerships are Tiff, Erin,
mm-hmm.
KJ, and Mac.
Yeah.
And that's really where we go into the next issue. Although I will say, I really don't want to get into this too much because we've gone long enough already, really. I love that they use the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles nicknames.
That's fantastic, yes. Yeah.
And the little bit of bickering about who got
who gets who, yes.
She was like, why is Leo?
Yeah.
Okay, but just real quick, best turtle, go.
Oh. Well, are we going from the
I
80s?
think it says a lot about your psychology. Yeah. So your like original four turtles.
I mean, my favorite back in the day would have been Donatello. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So wait, you have an older brother.
Yes.
So you're not the oldest.
No.
I feel like the oldest child would gravitate towards Donatello. Because he's kind of the exemplifier of all the values.
And
he's the intelligent.
Well, he was kind of the nerdy one. Yeah. It was that, or I mean, the other answer was Mikey, because Michelangelo was the quote unquote youngest.
Relief,
yeah.
Well, as the middle child, and I obviously this was not my rationale at the time, but as the middle child, you're nodding like you already know. Yeah. Raphael was my favorite.
Yeah.
It's just like
because Raphael's the overlooked one. He's the one who wants to be the leader. He's always second behind.
He's overlooked. He's incredibly gifted.
Yes, yeah.
But just emotionally not well adjusted.
No. He thinks
so I don't. But Mackenzie should be Raphael, right? I don't remember what her.
I don't know who's who.
She got.
Yeah.
we only know that Leo's
Aaron. Yeah,
is Aaron.
Yeah. Which isn't unrealistic.
No, she's the glue.
Yeah.
And that's why old Aaron tells young Aaron, keep the girls together.
Yeah.
Like, it's you have the power to do that, and that's the Leonardo.
There really isn't a Michelangelo. There really isn't a Michelangelo.
Bombarding people.
There's not really a Michelangelo of the group. I mean, it would.
That's true. There's no goofball.
No, because Tiffany would be Donatello. I would think
Tiffany would be Donatello.
And then
and Mac would be Raphael, which just means KJ is
by default. Yeah. But
maybe she's Splinter.
Yeah.
I don't know.
By default, but she definitely doesn't have the qualities you would think to be Michelangelo. But yeah, no, I think that's a very fun reference, and again something that they would
But see,
they
to
would
me,
definitely do.
So there's two types of pop culture references, and one of them is great, and one of them is annoying. Like the way Community, the TV show, would make a pop culture reference is by reenacting it and doing an homage to it, while still moving its plot forward, which is genius.
Yeah, and very difficult.
Yes, very difficult. And the way that like Family Guy does it is just like serial name dropping. Like we'll just drop as many things as we can, and that counts as a reference to that. And it's like, but to what end? Like you didn't do anything with it; you just brought it up. And so I like that. Okay, so I'm not current on. I just watched season 1, but in Stranger Things, it felt like there was a lot of like basking in 80s nostalgia just for the sake of it. It's we said it here so we could enjoy the nostalgia.
There is a lot
but
of
it doesn't serve a purpose.
Well, Stranger Things, I think, does both of those things because it is about, hey, look at all this 80s stuff here, but being in the 80s is like kind of important to the story. So it's a little bit of both.
So I didn't make it far enough.
But I think it does tread that line though of as I talked about in the very first arc of this, the very first episode of the first volume, that the thing they didn't do was just randomly put 80s stuff in there. Like, the Family Guy thing, as you mentioned, and I've had this conversation with a buddy of mine who loves Family Guy, thinks it's hilarious. And the thing I always point to of Family Guy is like Kool-Aid Man breaking through the wall and going, oh yeah, like that's funny because Kool-Aid Man's funny. It's not funny because Family Guy's funny.
Right. Because Family Guy didn't make it funny.
Because if the Kool-Aid Man just broke in through the wall of literally any show or movie and went, oh yeah, like that's going to be funny because Kool-Aid Man is funny. And so the thing that they didn't do, which I appreciated in the first volume, is like, again, there was no one just like held up a Rubik's Cube to be like, hey, look, Rubik's Cube. Remember this? 80s. That's the kind of stuff they don't do. And something like this here that, this kind of reference here in 2171, that if you're telling 4 preteen girls, you need to make up code names for each other, like incredibly high on that list is going to be Ninja Turtles. Like it just is, like that. Oh, yeah. That makes sense. And
I wasn't in the comics. I just watched the cartoon.
Well, exactly. And the comics are very different. My brother read those comics, and he said they are very good. I've read some of them, but yeah, just the comics. It was so pervasive in the culture at that time for kids of a certain age, of which these girls are. So yeah, it is. That's one of those references. It doesn't feel forced. It makes total sense that you don't have to justify why they're doing it, because if you were alive at that time, if you're aware of it, that's exactly what they would pick.
Right.
That would be absolute forefront of mind of, oh, there are 4 of us here. We need code names, Ninja Turtles, just like that. And everybody knows what they're talking about. They're all on the same page with it.
Yeah. It's just a no-brainer.
Yeah.
Then we have, they find the clean box.
Yeah.
One of my other favorite lines in this story arc is when the two Tiff squared, as I will call them, tell Aaron, "I wouldn't go in there if I were you." And Aaron says, "I'm the only one here who isn't you." So I'm gonna do it. Just like it's like, oh man, how long did you have that in the chamber?
Yeah, he's been waiting to use that one.
Because he didn't do it with the 2 Aarons.
Yeah.
We are getting 2 copies of multiple characters lots of opportunities, but just the perfect deployment of that one.
Well, I think it works because in 2016, the two Aaron, our groups are the two Aarons, and then Tiffany, KJ, Tiffany and Mac, because KJ is in the past. Here our groupings are KJ and Mac. They're going to the hospital to try to get a cure for Mac, and it's Aaron and the Tiffany's. So there is a third person to interact with that group, and it's not just the two characters who are versions of themselves. And so there's more opportunity for that kind of comedic back and forth. And that's a great line that you have to wonder that maybe after writing the second arc, you kind of realize like, oh, there's a missed opportunity there. Got to bring that back.
How has that not come up in any other time travel movie or anything?
Yeah.
Surely there are opportunities, although I will say most opportunities on that will be squandered because almost everyone has this rule about not seeing a past version of yourself.
Yeah.
And Brian K. Vaughan's like, no, screw that. Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So anyway, then we have KJ holding a doctor hostage, which we see KJ has just basically no fear of anything.
Yep.
Mac is just in awe, and this is after KJ has now told her, that future vision I had, we were romantic. I think is how she says it.
And Mac responds the way that you would expect Mac to respond, with
yellow pointy lines coming out of her head.
Yeah.
Like, it's just like speechless.
Yeah.
Which was the same response she had when she saw two guys making out in the library.
Yes.
But, and it wasn't necessarily judgment. It was just like, I don't have a grid for this.
Yeah. But
there's no shelf in my brain for this because it was hush hush in the 80s.
Yeah. But then once you kind of what comes down from that initial try to comprehension, she displays, again, a fairly aggressively violent homophobia, which we've seen throughout. That's something that we've seen from her. Again, it's how we're introduced to her. That of what kind of her mindset is. That she can't process this. Maybe because she doesn't want to or doesn't know how to. Maybe both. So she reacts, very physically, very violently. She shoves KJ away on that very next page after that reaction shot. But at the same time, though, when they're in the doctor's office and again, KJ is at a point now where she's very much like, listen, I've already killed a dude before, so this is clearly not a big deal for me anymore.
Right.
And Mac does look on with some awe, that whether she's starting to have some understanding of her sexuality or just the idea of like, dude, my friend is standing up for me, that someone is going to bat for me. Someone is here standing with me and fighting for me, which, by all accounts is probably something that's kind of new for her,
Yeah.
She's talked about her older brother and that clearly there's some affinity and affection for that.
And you saw that she was being bullied for her reading material in the opening dream sequence of this.
Yeah.
So she clearly didn't have a strong social life at school.
Yeah.
We already know she has a horrible family life.
Yeah. So the fact that she's got someone who is clearly willing to stand up and literally fight for her, I think that's a new feeling for her. And you see that register across her face throughout that scene. When they, obviously KJ gets the doctor to comply to do whatever futuristic body scan they do in 2171.
Yeah, which actually, that to me doesn't seem like the craziest stretch.
No,
in terms of what things would be possible.
It looks like it's literally like an open MRI. Like she's laying on a table that lights up from beneath her. And
I mean, it's like what in the really mediocre Matt Damon movie. I know that's not nearly specific enough. Elysium. They had like
I never saw that.
in the sky, and you just laid in a bed, and they could heal everyone.
Oh yeah.
The whole movie was about universal health care. Because the majority of people on Earth did not have access to this place.
Okay.
And his character was dying of something very curable, but he wasn't part of the elite social class, so he had no access to it. I liked the concept of it. The execution was just kind of meh. Anyway, issue 24, we open back in prehistoric times
Yeah.
with Wari and surprise twist Dr. Bronstein, who I believe is actually the first panel.
Yes.
Dr. Bronstein.
Yes.
In a period appropriate attire.
And we see her. We see her walking with a cane because last we saw her, she had a.
I have to be honest. I thought she died.
Yeah.
I did not remember her coming back in this story.
Yeah. So I think when the last we saw her, she had a lower back injury, and I think she made some comment
face was
about
covered in blood, and she said, "Run."
Yeah, well,
that's the panel.
Yeah. Well, I think she made some comment of maybe not being able to walk or move her legs. So if she did survive, maybe there was some paralysis there. But clearly, she's up and mostly ambulatory. But we do see her walking with a cane, so clearly not 100% fit, but alive and well. And yeah, we see her, and we see a spacecraft from the future has made its way back, and she is unclear exactly as to how it showed up. Whether because we know she sent our 4 paper girls. The idea was they were supposed to go back to her present, which was 2055, in her ship, and they were supposed to talk to her team to send a ship back. Well, they didn't go to 20. They didn't end up in 2055. They ended up in the year 2000. But still, somehow a ship shows up, and she's looking to go home. But Wari is very forceful, saying that you got to take Joppa with you. Because she fears for his survival.
Oh yeah, yeah, and I think we already covered how she came to be there and Joppo not knowing necessarily this story.
Yeah, well,
although with her mental state, you never really know how reliable it is.
Yeah, but we get the full explanation here in that Bronstein says, "Fine, okay, I'll if she's worried about taking Joppa with her because she doesn't know how to be a mother, how to take care of him." And Wari says, "Well, I'll show you." And so it turns out that all 3 of them go. And what Wari says, the older Wari says, they went to Indonesia years after her colleagues would have stopped looking for her. So clearly they didn't go back to 2055, which would have been Dr. Bronstein's present. They went into some years in the future, and the pact they made was that Dr. Bronstein would raise Wari and Joppo as her children. So Wari is her daughter and Joppo is her son. And that was the fiction they created, and that persisted all the way through. And again, as far as we know now, Joppo in current day, in his grandfather's state, does not know the truth. He does not know that is what really is his true nature. So yeah, we've now wrapped up the loose end of our of volume 3 now. Again, we've gone back to another thing that was presented in the first half of the story, and we've brought that full circle.
It makes you want to
flip
back to volume 3.
Yes.
Which is crazy because in volume 3 I couldn't wait to get out.
Yeah.
So he gets you one way or the other.
Exactly. Yeah. It becomes retroactively incredibly important, because not only it's about, because we know that we've already learned that grandfather is Joppo, but we don't know. Okay, well, last we saw him, he was a baby in prehistoric times. How does he get there? And now here we get the answer. We see what happened, and we get more information about both Dr. Bronstein and Wari. So it's you can go back to volume 3, not just for grandfather now, but we see the origin of all of it and how they got to where they are as time travelers. And it fills in these gaps and puts more weight on a story that, at the time when you're reading it in the moment, doesn't seem like the most important, but turns out it actually very much is. Yeah.
And then we cut back to Mackenzie. We find out she does not have leukemia or pre-leukemia. She has something called 4DC, which is a type of cancer, which obviously would have been misdiagnosed in 1990 or whenever that was, but non-treatable and related to time traveling. Yep. So ironically, this adventure where she discovers that she gets cancer is the cause of said cancer.
Yes. And this is the same disease we see our 3 male Tino's time travelers, Heck, Naldo, and Jude. We see, they're all slightly in some way disfigured. suffering from something. This is the same disease, this 4DC, this time traveler's cancer or whatever. That's kind of the end result that we see of them suffering from. So this is what Mac has, and eventually is what as far as we know, it kills her. So
yeah, unless she disappears in the time stream.
Yes.
Anyway, they have to make a brave getaway. KJ gets kind of sprayed with some knockout gas, but is able to use her jet boots to kick. What do we call him? Dr. Dr. No-Nards.
No-Nards, yeah.
Although I do have to wonder, not to be too crass, if that would do irreparable damage, getting jet boosted right in the crotch.
I don't know. It all depends on what that force is coming out of the boots. It's clearly some sort of propulsion. Because she jumps with it.
If Iron Man took off right in front of your, that would do some damage.
That's exactly what I was thinking. It's some sort of repulsor thing. So there is some sort of thrust coming out there. I'm sure it probably feels like a baseball bat, directly to your your body. So probably not good. I think
that might even be generous.
Probably not good. Probably not good. Yeah, it's probably more like a small aircraft.
So we then we get a little more with Grandfather before getting back to what appears to be the big twist, like hockey stick redux, that Aaron has already come to Wari and given a map for herself for the future.
Yes.
And so she thinks, oh, we did this with the hockey stick.
Yeah.
I must have done this again.
Yeah.
Which is mind-bending for a woman suffering from dementia. But the reader at this point should follow with relative ease.
Yeah, the idea that
clearly she needed information now.
Yeah.
She gets it from a future version of herself who in the future comes back to before she needed to be here.
Yes.
And she knows that because it's already done.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah.
That's the basic mechanic, although we will call that into question in the very next issue, which is the final one here.
But in the moment, it makes perfect, again, for Aaron, from her perspective.
It's everything we've known so far playing out.
Everything, things have happened the way they've happened because they've already done it. So, I'm going to get this, I'm going to find this map.
Not had the freedom to deviate from that.
Yeah.
In fact, now they're like banking on it.
Exactly.
They're
very
dependent
exactly.
on it.
Yeah. The way she looks at it now is, this is how it has to happen. I'm going to find this thing. If Wari thinks I was here, but I don't remember it, that must mean I show up, a future me shows up in the past. I just haven't done it yet. So Aaron now fully believes, she understands perfectly that, Wari's not crazy. It's just that I haven't experienced it yet because I'm going to do this later. I'm going to do, in my future, I'm going to come back to a little bit in the past to do this thing that allows me to do more things right now. And said for her at this point, that all her experience with time travel tells her that this is how it's going to be. This is what it's supposed to be. But yes, that's quickly upended in the final issue of this arc.
Yes. So we get KJ and Mackenzie on the rooftop, finally, both awake, finally share that iconic kiss from the earlier in the story. And we see, I think on KJ's face, kind of everything she's expected and now has been kind of leaning into.
Yeah.
And that was on KJ's face. And on Mackenzie's face, like a pleasant surprise.
Yeah.
We get confused but no judgment from either Tiff. However, the police show up.
Yeah.
And old Tiff does sacrifice herself to save young Tiff.
Yeah.
And now we've entered the bleak light of fatalism.
Yeah.
Where, or our characters have.
Yeah.
Mackenzie has realized you die when you die. We learned that back on page 1 in book 1. So no point in resisting that. Now Tiff sees, well, that's where I die. No changing the course of events there. So now everyone feels locked into half our characters are going to die.
Yeah.
In their like 20s.
Yeah. Or prematurely, earlier than you quote unquote are supposed to die.
Right. And seemingly very, very bleak, very depressing revelation here.
Yeah.
Especially with this framework that we just said they're locked into of you can't change things, and you're bound to do what you've already done.
Yeah.
Which is a harsh fatalism. So anyway, Aaron gets this map. All the girls meet up after Tiff has sacrificed herself. Grandfather is taking the entire cathedral back to 1988.
Yes.
Trying to clean up and repair the damage.
Yeah.
While also emphasizing the importance of getting those girls back there. These girls meet up, take this elevator where they were told to meet at 717. Lo and behold, now this is my only question. This is future Aaron, who they kicked, through a tear earlier.
Well, it's future clone Aaron.
Future clone Aaron,
yes.
right. Like evil Aaron.
Yes.
And I assume now that evil Aaron is the one who gave the map to Wari.
Yes. Well, they mentioned that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's explicit.
Yeah. She talks about it. He said, I thought it would take forever to learn your lousy penmanship, but it turns out that's a nature over nurture kind of thing.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Yes.
So yeah,
okay.
it is clone Aaron, who is back from whatever time
Wherever
they kicked her into.
her.
Yeah. Which we'll talk about here in a little bit, as we get towards the last pages. But yeah, she's been tracking them through time, and at some point she holds out what looks like one of the apples from the computer. Right. So presumably, that's a relic that she would have found in whatever future time she's from, and traces it back to
when they accessed
it in 2171. So she knows that they're going to be here on a certain day. So she comes back a little earlier, meets up with Wari, draws the map to get them there. And as we see above this tower, there's clearly another folding right there. We see the same kind of portal action that we've seen. So yeah, the idea is that they think,
and a detonation timer on her back.
Well, that's a couple of things there, yeah. But yeah, they think they're going to a folding that's going to get them back to 1988 because that's what the map says that they think their Aaron did. Lo and behold, it is clone Aaron, and they find out that clone Aaron specifically says, she's young, she's a child, she's tired of fighting. So, I mean, that she's been at war basically her whole life, and that if she lets them go back to 1988 together. She says, the old timers have won. And, right before she detonates her backpack, she says, sorry, you girls are just no good together. Meaning that.
Which is contrary to what all the future selves have said.
Yes. Yeah. The idea that them being together is bad for clone Aaron's future. Because as you say, them ending up back where they belong means the old timers have won. Means they have gone back and reset the timeline, and things are as they are supposed to be because they are as they have always been. They're not changing anything. So clone Aaron ignites her backpack and presumably sends them all through different angles of this folding. And as we see, each of the four girls ends up in a different place maybe a different time.
Very different times.
Yeah.
One of them appears to be, maybe like 1920s.
Yeah.
But it has like the sepia tone.
Yeah.
That at first glance, if there weren't a car in the frame, I would have said like, oh, that's kind of like old Western. Yeah. Most time travel things cannot resist an old Western setting.
Oh, they love it.
Including like Gideon Falls.
Yeah.
Which was like not really even a time travel. That would be a really interesting one to cover in this podcast.
First off, Gideon Falls was a time traveling multiverse story hidden in a psychological horror story. It was absolutely right. Yeah. But real quick, let's go through what we see in each one of them. So the first one we see is Tiffany, and she is in some weird platform world with like flying millipede ships or whatever. And now it is worth noting, if you go back to volume 2, the folding that clone Aaron apparently wants to take them through is this future, which at the time Aaron says is sometime way, way, way in the future. So we don't know when this is, but presumably it's very far in the future, perhaps even farther in the future than clone Aaron is from. But this is the one they kicked her into. When they tabletopped her over this is what she fell into. And so this is where Tiffany ends up. Don't know when it is, but again, presume it's way in the future. Our next one is KJ, and KJ is in what looks like, early 20th century. Now there's a headline in the Cleveland Preserver there that, what does it say? Iraq becomes republic after military coup. So, I'm sure we can go back and double check exactly when that is, but yeah, it very much looks like a Newsies kind of a timeline.
Apparently, Iraq became an independent kingdom in 1932. A republic was proclaimed in 1958.
There we go.
And that, to me, matches that car.
Absolutely. 1958. Absolutely. So, she ends up in what looks like, again, she immediately meets up with 4 paper boys, for the Cleveland Preserver there. So yeah, that makes total sense if we're in the, mid 20th century. Then we have Mac, who shows up in, who knows when, but what looks like some giant, maybe not totally giant, but some like medium-sized kaiju behind her.
I think if I proportionally were standing next to that, I'm going to go ahead and call it giant.
I mean, it's probably what, like 12, 15 feet high. It's probably pretty big. I'm not saying, but you think kaiju, you think full on Godzilla, 120 feet in the air.
I think it's like the size that Hagrid is described as being.
Kind of. Yeah. But again, we have no idea when and where this is, but, maybe giant irradiated thing. Again, probably presume that it's somewhere in the future. It looks like it's kind of a desolate wasteland area. Maybe it's like post-nuclear fallout or something like that. But again, we don't know where that is, but she's immediately in danger. And then the final page is Aaron, who shows up in what looks like relatively contemporary times. It is again
Halloween. And it has to be 2016, right?
Or pretty close. Well, not necessarily, because
16, 17.
I mean, we don't know.
That's true. That's a figure.
Yeah. We see someone in a Donald Trump costume, and Donald Trump has been a public figure since quite a long time. But noticeably, the sky again is still that kind of purplish.
That grandfather was working on.
Yeah. So it appears Aaron has fallen into a time much closer to our quote unquote present day. But again, the idea is they have been separated through time, and now our 4 girls are each on their own, heading into what is the final issues of the story. So
yeah. My last note on the art here is that I just appreciate that the mask he's wearing is the exact same color as the pumpkin he's holding. No other comments about that. I just really love that little bit of detail in the coloring.
Most definitely intentional.
For that gift.
Most definitely intentional.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's not an accident, especially when this is written in 2017.
Yes.
2018.
Yeah.
Probably.
These issues were published between June and October 2018. So yeah, written probably early half of 2018.
Okay. Now we enter our final segment, which is our bookmark. Yeah. I think I have already hinted at 2 of them. So I'll let you go, and then I'll share mine because I have definitively landed on mine.
Sure. Okay. Well, one thing we mentioned before, and maybe it might double up to what you talked about earlier. The Tim Book 3 reference is fantastic. And I just love the idea that Tiffany talked about, again, that life being ephemeral. You think about how, in what is a relatively short amount of time, how something that is, seemingly the most important thing to you in your life right now can have absolutely no impact on it in a few years later. That's just how time.
You yourself will be invisible to people in the future.
Yeah. But what the other thing I want to that's probably that's like the fun one. But I do want to, maybe this might bring the podcast down a little bit, but I think it is definitely worth noting. And I think it's something that had been hinted at in especially in volume 2, but here in volume 5, there are very, very, very strong allusions to the murder of Tamir Rice by the Cleveland police, which happened in 2014. Tamir was a 12-year-old black kid who was someone who, when we think about the Black Lives Matter movement and the amount of African Americans who have been killed and murdered by police, he was on kind of an early end of it. But 2014 is an important year because
an early end of the current
the current costumes. Yeah, the current costumes.
It's a very old problem.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Our character dropped in 1958. We'll likely be seeing some of it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's nothing new.
But again, so that happened in 2014. So it's definitely on the mind. This story takes place in Cleveland. Those first issues are written in 2016, and even in 2016, in Volume 2, I think Clone Aaron comes upon a girl who is wearing a shirt that says "Justice for Tamir Rice and John Crawford." John Crawford was another man who was killed, I think, in the Dayton area by police. And there are very specific allusions here when the Tiffany's, KJ and Mac are on the roof and they're confronted by that police officer. And he takes a shot at them. And Tiffany is enraged, like, you would shoot at children. And then our Tiffany, 1988 Tiffany, says a very rational line of saying, just do what he says. He's talking about put your hands up, kneel. And he's just saying, just do what he says, with the idea of if you listen to what he says, you do what he says, you follow his orders, you're going to be okay. And 2000 Tiffany says explicitly, yeah, I remember thinking that too. Thinking that was going to be okay.
Wouldn't that be great?
Yeah, exactly. So there are these very strong allusions, and I think that's one of those things. It's part of the idea of, we talked about how, you see kind of 2000 Tiffany's growth as an adult. I think that moment right there, because she has the memory and the knowledge of what happened I'm sorry. She doesn't have that knowledge in 2000. She doesn't have the specific knowledge of what happened to someone like Tamir Rice. She doesn't have that yet, but she has the understanding and the probably the personal experience with police. And for BKV and Cliff and the team to put them in that, to make that a focal point, and to have that front of mind, in 2171, the idea that maybe things haven't gotten a lot different, and that for that to be something that 2000 Tiffany kind of feels is like maybe kind of a last straw, that you as the police would fire at children. Like, how dare you do that? And
the fact that they're still doing that.
Exactly. Yeah.
In 2177.
Yeah. Because there is a thing about, this is the first time in this story that we actually see the future, because 2016 is the future to our characters, but it's the present day for us, the reader. The year 2000 is the future for our characters, but that's our past as the reader. We are actually in the future now. And the thing about Jump into the Future is that all visions of the future are reflections of the time at which those predictions are made, So, which is why it's always funny to look back at what Back to the Future thought that the future would look like.
I know.
What
and
George,
I was ready.
Yeah,
I was ready. January 1st, 2015, I turned my jeans inside out, and I looked like a fool.
Yeah. It's when you look back at what George Orwell thought 1984 was going to look like. What we think of the future is, what we vision is always informed by the time we're in. And so in this vision of the future here, of where there are so many great things, and there's cures for all these, all these types of cancers or whatnot, that there's still this sense of potential dread and fear of the police. Because there's even a line early in this arc, I think Grandfather says it, something about, how the Cleveland police, they don't take prisoners, which is a really ominous thing to say about the police force. But it's the idea that this future is still informed by what's going on in the world in which it's written, which was 2018, and the things that are happening in terms of society's relationship to the police is still something that, despite however great things may be, whatever technological advancements may be in the future, hundreds of years in the future, that some things still haven't changed. Some things are still the way they are. And that's both kind of a very bleak way to look at it, but it's also a way to give commentary on current day, by setting things in the future. And
I think obviously it's still an issue. We're recording this in 2022.
Yeah.
Still an issue now.
Yeah.
In the future, there's a little more outrage each time, it seems.
Yeah.
But
it never stops.
So little action.
It never stops. And
yes.
And so what I do really appreciate is that it is that they put that in the book in a way that is saying that, yes, the problems that we've had, the problems that we're having are probably problems, if we don't do anything, we're still going to have in the future. I appreciate them putting that in there and continuing to draw light on it for the kind of thing that when you read this, years from now, I don't know how many years from now, when you pick up volume 2 and you see that t-shirt that says Justice for Tamir Rice and John Crawford, that maybe it draws someone to go back and look up and see what that is. And maybe sometime in the future we can look back at that and it'll seem like an anomaly. But in the world we're in right now, the world that this book was written in and is depicted in the future, that it appears that it's probably not, that it's simply a reflection of our current day problems through the lens of some seemingly idealistic future. And it's not the most fun thing to look at or think about, maybe not the most enjoyable, but it's something that I appreciate them putting in the book to constantly remind the reader of that, the things that are going on, that nothing exists in a vacuum, I guess. That this being said at a certain time, in a certain place in Cleveland where this has happened, that they can draw note to it, even in a fantastical story about time travel. So that's my bookmark for this.
I think that's great, and I think that's actually on an even broader level, just zooming out even further, just speaks to the substance of the medium.
Absolutely,
that comics are not mere entertainment.
Absolutely,
they are primarily entertainment. They are entertaining, but at the same time, I was living in St. Louis for Michael Brown's murder,
mm-hmm.
and around that time or shortly after and inspired by that, there was Scott Snyder's Batman 44,
mm-hmm.
Issue 44 of the New 52 run,
mm-hmm.
which was about the police killing an unarmed black teen,
mm-hmm.
and Batman showing an implicit bias and not suspecting the police of a murder like this. And it was just like, bam, even Batman can have racial blinders on. Just a really
even with his
history
with the Gotham Police Department,
right. Yeah, he knows them and he's investigating them all the time.
Absolutely, yeah. No, that's a phenomenal
the
issue.
Power of the medium.
Absolutely. It's an incredible issue.
It's not worth anything, so you can go find it in a dollar bin somewhere. I have one copy framed on my wall because I just love it.
I have it,
and then I have a reader copy that doesn't even get bagged and boarded. It's just like. Yeah,
that issue.
It was Jock.
It was Jock and Francisco Francavilla. There were two guys on the art there. I have that book currently signed by Francavilla, and I it's an issue I want to get signed by both Scott Snyder and Jock as well, because it is an incredible issue. Yeah, it is one of those things that comics have always done, sometimes more effectively than others. There is a Batman story about landmines. There's been Green Arrow, Green Lantern issues about drug use and things like that maybe sometimes were a little more ham-handed back in the day.
Green Arrow's not doing social justice. It's not really Green Arrow.
Yeah, so they sometimes maybe a little more ham-handed, depending on the era it was written. But yeah, there's always a way that you can use this medium to translate story, whether it's completely overtly or a little obliquely. Just a way to draw your eye and draw the reader's attention. It's a reminder that nothing happens in a vacuum. And so, this is a thing that is clearly important to Brian K. Vaughan. He's a Cleveland native, so, this is something that I'm sure is very important to him. And he finds a way to put it in a book a fantastical story about time traveling girls from the 80s. It's still a way to put in there and remind the reader of things that are going on around them.
Yeah. Well, I've already mentioned my bookmark, so I'll just use that as my sign-off line tonight. But just want to thank everyone for listening again. Another week. We have just one left for Paper Girls. Hopefully by now you have found our Facebook group, Storied Arcs. You found our Instagram page. You have found our Twitter handle. And you've been to storiedarcs.com, where you can find bonus content for each story arc that we're covering, as well as all of the issues we're doing. And you can weigh in for the mailbag that we'll record months later for Paper Girls as we're collecting people's feedback. And you can also vote and weigh in on the next story that we'll cover. So, for my final sign-off, I'll just remind you that only dorks want to escape life.
Peace out.